Okay, so welcome at another recording for StartupLeap. Today we're talking to how to decide on your MVP and what your MVP or minimal viable product actually entails. So before we get started, Jan Thij, may I ask you, who are you, what have you done so far, and what are you doing today?
My name is Jan Thij Bakker. I'm a serial entrepreneur, specifically in tech, software as a service, peer-to-peer communities. Founded 5 companies, sold 2.
Which ones?
Medical Media was a medical publishing company where we published medical information towards consumers. One of the biggest health website in the Netherlands with 5.5 million uniques a month.
Okay.
I founded a Easy LMS SaaS learning management system. I founded Share Your Meal, which is a peer-to-peer meal sharing platform.
Yeah.
Founded Lean Library.
So the Share Your Meal has become quite popular, at least. So
Yeah.
now millions of people have heard about it. You know, it's been like a foster child for the sharing economy and those kind of things.
Yeah, in the Netherlands.
Yeah, in the Netherlands,
Yeah.
of course.
So it's very local. In here,
Yeah.
in the Netherlands, it's very big.
All right. So while Lean Library, you were a part of that for about a year and a half.
Yeah.
Something like that. So
Yeah,
you joined later on, and that
Yeah.
went rather quickly.
Yeah, Lean Library. I met Lean Library at the Utrecht Incubator as a mentor, and they were actually in the phase that they only had an MVP, and I stepped in, and the journey took about 1.5 years to exit.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe going forward on the example of the Lean Library, what do you define as an MVP?
Yeah, it's a good question. So an MVP, as the name says, it's the minimal viable product. So most people or also look at an MVP in that sense, that it's something you build which at the minimum sort of has the key added value of your product or solution. However, for me, in the startup journey, you're continuously testing things, testing your assumptions about your sales cycle, about your technology, about your team, about marketing. You're continuously testing everything, and for me, that an MVP is just really not one thing. It could be something. If you want to test your technology, you just want to think about on how to most quickly test your technology.
Like Y Combinator, for example, has a very infamous rule that says if you're launching after more than 2 weeks, you're launching something that is too big.
Yeah,
What do you think about something like that?
Yeah, it's,
or maybe does it vary per sector, or how do you define?
Yeah, of course.
Does it?
Yeah, I know it really varies. If you have a very complex piece of technology that you want to build, and you found a team of specialists who can build that, but they think that it takes at least 2 months to sort of define or to come up with the actual test that validates the core of the technology, then it's 2 months.
Yeah.
But most of the time, so when I look at a new startup, and I sometimes, when I start, I build an MVP to test out the usability, to test out end user interaction.
Yeah.
But it could also be that you want to test out sales and you want to show a particular use case to the client. So it really depends on what you define as what you want to test, on what your MVP looks like.
So you can have multiple MVPs actually for what eventually will become the same product.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, you can. I mean, for Lean Library, what we did there, my partner, he created this MVP during summer in his attic. And when we started, we just threw that away. And we started all over, but we started over by testing the sales cycle.
Yeah.
And we tested the sales cycle by not showing that product, but just showing a clickable demo of how it could work. Yeah. And then we started signing deals.
Okay. And how many deals did you sign before you actually had a functioning prototype or product then?
Well, we signed 5 deals before we wrote a single line of code. But then we didn't start building sort of an MVP that we would throw away later. We just started with the basic of the product. Yeah. Because we already knew the technology would work because he'd already built it.
Yeah.
We tested our sales cycle successfully,
Yeah.
and then we knew we could just start out building the product.
Yeah. So how would you suggest that startup founders, either for maybe B2C or B2B solutions, how should they start from a product perspective?
Well, B2C is always more difficult because a consumer, you can only validate the sales cycle if you have a product that you can sell to a consumer.
Yeah.
But for B2B, it's very easy to just go out there and talk with your clients and give them a clickable demo or something, a PowerPoint which explains how you're going to solve their problem, in what way and what the pricing would be, give them a contract.
What kind of responses did you get from the organization that eventually turned into customers before you actually had something? Like, did you tell them, like, we don't have anything yet, or how do you communicate that with your potential clients?
Yeah, so there are two questions in there. So first, yes, I always tell them that we're working on it and that we want commitment from clients before we can finalize it, or we give them a discount. But I'm always very open.
You do, talking about discounts, you do let them pay for your pilot.
Yes. Yeah. So in a sense. So we let them sign most of the times I let them sign the contract. But in that contract it states that they only have to pay when we deliver the product.
Yeah.
So they don't have any risk. If we don't deliver the product, they don't have to pay.
No.
But we have the commitment from the client that when we actually deliver the product, that we have our first revenue immediately, which makes investment decisions a lot easier.
Absolutely.
But the reaction that you get from clients when you approach them like this is, it's the same with every sales. Some people don't respond at all, and some people respond very enthusiastically, and you just have to up your numbers to such a high amount that you get enough positive reactions.
Yeah.
And that gives you very valuable information about your sales cycle, because if your positive reaction rate is 20%, and of that 20% you can sign 50%, then you know your funnel. Yeah. So that's a very...
And it's still a sales game, so it's all about numbers. The higher the numbers.
Conversion rates, numbers. So a lot of times, next to churn, the sales cycle is the most important in SaaS software on how big your company is going to be and how fast you can grow. So actually going through that and going through that pain of people not responding, of getting a lot of no's, is vital information for your business later on.
As you mentioned, you can get a lot of those responses or no responses before you actually write a single line of code.
Yes. Okay,
cool. So thinking about the launch quickly, fail fast, those kind of principles. Eventually you mentioned, so you talk to customers, potential customers, find out what they like, what they don't like, get them to sign a contract for when you eventually do launch. So when you have a feeling like, okay, we're getting somewhere, and you're actually starting to build something, what is then how do you decide on the first version? What gets to be in the first version, what doesn't get to be in the first version, or do you decide as a team? How does that work? Do you ask your customers for what kind of features they want?
Yeah, it's a good question as well. I do all of that. So that sounds paradoxical, or not sure how to phrase that, ambiguous. So it's me who decides based on input of clients, of the team, of other stakeholders that are relevant, friends, mentors, basically everybody. But in the end, when I do something, most of the time I'm the product guy, so I do it. You need to have somebody as head of your product with a strong vision, but who at the same time is very keen to get all the signals from all the stakeholders.
Yes. How do you decide when you have all those stakeholders, customers, team members, etc.? Like, what pieces of advice do you use for your MVP, and which do you disregard?
Is
it too broad?
It's a very broad question. So let's take a specific example.
Yeah.
You sign a client in that phase, and then there are a few criteria that I look at if you want to look at it from an abstract level. So I do this from the gut, but if I look at it from an abstract level, I look first at, is this a client that is really in the center of the target audience that I want to service? Then next thing is the person at the client side, so my contact at the client, what is my opinion of how well he understands the problem or how well he understands the solution, and so that's the client side of things. And if, for example, the client is straight in the center, but my contact at the client really is a bit clueless on where the product wants to go, then I will take that into my decision to how serious to take his recommendations. And at the same time, what I think most important is the most important question in those recommendations for an MVP is it really necessary right now? Like, really necessary? Are they not going to sign that contract because that is not in there?
Yeah.
And when it's sort of vague, or clients are pushing hard against that, what I tend to do sometimes try the trick of charge them extra. Yeah. So if you want that feature, that's fine, but it's not in our current roadmap.
Yeah.
But if you need it, it's this amount extra. And
maybe it will be useful for other or future clients.
If it's not, if I don't think it's valuable for future clients, I don't build it at all.
Okay.
But if I think it's valuable for future clients, but it's not short-term roadmap, then I usually
ask them for extra money.
And not because of the money, but because of the validation that they really think it's valuable.
Yeah. All right. Because if they really want to pay for it, then they really need it.
Apparently, they really see the value of that feature, and then maybe I could be wrong. Like, it's a very valuable feature, and if they're willing to shell out, why not?
So besides them wanting to give you money, of course, what are other triggers for potential clients to say, like, hey, this is a quality MVP, this is valuable to us?
Well, most of the times when you have those discussions where you propose your solution based on the problem they're having, that's already the MVP. So 80% of it is already in there. And, so
is that because they won't take the meeting if they don't think you're going to be valuable?
Oh no, people take meetings to talk about their problems, so you don't even have to have a solution. You can just call somebody and say, look, I'm really interested in your problem.
Yeah.
I think I might have a solution. Could you give your opinion about that?
Yeah.
And that's already enough to get people to talk to you. But in order for them to sign or be interested in signing, so the next stage would be like the end of a conversation could be, okay, you're really interested in the solution.
Yeah.
Are you that interested? Shall I send you a quote?
Mm-hmm.
Under this and this, with this and this criteria, that you don't pay until we deliver it, but we want some commitment, and we're looking for 5 pilot clients. And, well, if they say yes, then you already sort of agree with the client on the proposed solution, and you're going to talk about details then.
Mm-hmm.
But those details are important to prevent feature creep in your MVP.
Yeah, I can imagine. So you decide what you build. Eventually,
Yes, but that's a paradoxical thing, right? Because I decide based upon the signals that I get from the stakeholders. So there's somebody who decides, but the input that gets in there, it's an algorithm, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
We're all biological algorithms. So.
Yeah. All right. So going back to your previous companies, so what were the MVPs at those companies? What were they like? Besides, of course, the one with Lean Library, are there situations that you think like, okay, so with the experience that I have now, I would have done things completely different? Or are you very happy with your past self? If you think, hey, this was actually a very good MVP.
No, never. No, I have a great example of Easy LMS, where the MVP for Easy LMS doesn't resemble in any way the product that it is right now.
How long ago was that?
5 years.
All right.
Yeah.
A lot has changed.
Yeah, it's not even, so nothing is the same.
Yeah.
It's a different target audience. It's a different product. It's a different problem.
Yeah.
A different
So how did you start out with your MVP at EasyLMS?
I had an idea of something fun that I wanted to do or to build.
Yeah.
And I took a different route there. So I wanted, this was the time when microtransactions on mobile were still a thing.
Yeah.
So I wanted to build a gamified quiz where people could purchase with microtransactions.
All right, yeah.
So I had the idea of, I still think it's a fun idea, that you have this mobile app where every day you can become the smartest person of the world.
Yeah.
And you would have, that would be over you would have rounds within one day or over several days where you first could become champion of your city, then champion of your country,
nice.
and then Europe or your continent.
Like a Trivial Pursuit multiplayer version.
Exactly, just some sort of like a ladder poker game where you and then every day you have like one day like I'm the smartest person in the world, and the idea was then to have buy-ins, like the same thing you have with
poker, something like that.
No, that could be, or we had like ask the audience, outline, and that sort of thing.
Okay.
So we built sort of.
Who wants to be a millionaire?
Yeah, that was one I was looking for. So we built the sort of the prototype of just one round of that, without the regional divisions or multiple rounds, and. I showed it to some people, and then there was interest from the business community, which we didn't expect, and there was interest from.
How did they find out?
I went talk to.
Okay.
So I just did everything. I knew that if you wanted to launch like a mobile app like that you would really need a lot of funding for marketing to make it flow quickly and.
Absolutely.
I'm not sure if that was a high influence in the beginning. You had a company called QuizUp who sort of did a similar thing, not with the regions, but you could trivia pursuit against each other, and they got I think it's no longer really a success, but they got like 35 million in funding. Yeah. So they exploded in usage, and they got 35 million in funding, and we were like, okay.
From the US, right?
No, I'm not even sure if they're from the US or somewhere in Scandinavia. But I'm not even sure what they're doing right now. But we thought, okay, maybe we should pivot. Yeah. And we went talking to some. I just called some friends who I thought could be in relevant positions for this, because we of course had identified some use cases, because it was a fun game to play. You can play it around a certain knowledge subject. Yeah. So we went to a lawyer, a big law firm, and they wanted to integrate it into their recruitment program. Yeah. And there was a publisher who integrated it into their platform for advertisers, and then we thought, all right, there are more use cases than we can think of and that we can approach. So let's just build this generic site where we just say we have this product, and just use it whatever way you want, and that took off, luckily. But I would never recommend doing that again. Leaving the use case up, putting it out there and just waiting for people to come and think of use cases for you is a very risky strategy, and we got lucky. So so that's an example where we, from a MVP or product perspective, we completely missed the point in the first year, but we survived by being flexible.
That's why you talked about Lean Library as an example, where you just solve the potential with the clickable demo. Yeah. So for example, asking for the people that don't have a CTO or a product guy or anyone technical working besides them, do you think that you can test almost any assumption or any startup idea through an MVP that it entails like a landing page or a clickable demo or anything that you can do with the NoCode tools today?
I think you can get very far, but it really depends again on your market, your product, how deep your technology stack is, or needs to be. But I think you can get way further than 5 years ago. With all the standard tools that are out there. And I what my advice would be is to really to divide, separate, hoe zeg je dat? En uit elkaar trekken.
Think about the steps.
Think
about the first principles.
Nee, van de dingen die je wilt testen. So most people build. Let me rephrase. Dan kan je het hier knippen. Most people build an MVP to test out several things at once. So they want to maybe test their technology, their sales, their UX or user interaction. And I would strongly suggest that you look at all these individual goals of the MVP that you have with the MVP and think if there's a way you can solve it without incorporating it into your MVP. Because most of the times that is the case. It could be maybe you have to come at a problem from a different angle, but I would recommend it because most of the times when you test a certain thing standalone, like a sales cycle, you're more flexible in the approach and can more quickly change your approach. So if you build an MVP to test your sales cycle and after 2 meetings you find out that your current angle to the solution is not the right one, you have to rebuild your entire MVP. While if you build a clickable demo, within 1 hour you can have it changed. So I'm not saying it's possible in every case, but just separate the goals, see if you can find an angle where you can test the thing you want to specifically test outside of an MVP, and try that.